I was only 22 when I discovered there was a lump in my womb. The doctors put it down to a fibroid, a very common, benign, and more often than not harmless, lump of tissue. My symptoms, incredibly heavy, painful periods though, just kept getting worse and worse. It was only after having surgery for fibroid removal a year and a half after my initial diagnosis that I found out I had womb cancer. Advertisement continue reading below. Time and time again young women with gynecological issues struggle to get taken seriously by doctors, and take far too long to get a diagnosis. 21,000 women are diagnosed with a type of gynocancer per year in the UK, and unfortunately 21 of these women die every day. Early diagnosis is critical in improving outcomes for patients, which is why increased awareness of the symptoms of these conditions is so very important. Related article: female cancers you might not have heard of. Gynecological cancer charity The Eve Appeal urges anyone with abnormal bleeding, unusual discharge, changes to the skin of the vulva, or any chronic and excessive bloating to see the GP. Although womb cancer is more commonly diagnosed in women over 40, women of all ages are affected. The most common symptom is abnormal bleeding. In 2014 I had a scan to check for polycystic ovaries as I still suffered from acne and heavy periods. This is when my first fibroid was found. I was told it was harmless and not to worry, and to come back if it became any worse. I vividly remember asking the doctor how I would know if it got worse, and he simply replied, "You'll know." I was infuriated by the reply, but reassured that it wasn't something to really worry about. Advertisement continue reading below. Bleeding during sex. He first went back to the GP with bleeding during sex. I was examined and found to have an eroded cervix, which can happen to women with high levels of estrogen over a prolonged length of time. It was assumed this was to do with being on the pill, but on reflection was probably something far more sinister. After this, my already heavy periods began getting even heavier, but at this point it was still easy to dismiss them as within normal range. But then I had an incident serious enough to make me step back and think something might be wrong. At the end of a plane journey I stood up and, perhaps from the air pressure, had a heavy and immediate bleed. My trousers were soaked to my knees and I was shrouded with embarrassment. I stood in the passport queue for 40 minutes with my coat tied around my waist, before one was able to retreat to a toilet, throw my trousers in the bin and cry. I hadn't been sexually active for several months, but the bleed was so heavy I thought the only possible explanation was that I had been unknowingly pregnant and suffered a miscarriage. It didn't occur to me to think of cancer. I was obviously too young for cancer.